Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, Nicola.
Do you think that Starmer can get the Midlands and perhaps the rest of the country on side in the local elections?
Oh, probably. I mean, used to, wasn't American politics, if you could walk and chew gum at the same time, then you were a viable candidate. As long as Sir Keir Starmer walks and chews gum, then he'll win the local elections, and indeed he'll win the general election. Not so much for any of his outstanding attributes, but because of what he's facing.
I know exactly, because I know you well, what you're going to say to this. In the last couple of weeks, Nick and I have sat here and we've watched Rachel Reeves, who allegedly, after their win, will become the first female Chancellor of Great Britain. She quoted Margaret Thatcher. Yesterday, or rather today, Starmer's going to quote Boris Johnson. I don't see much difference between these two parties. There's no money. I don't see any meat on the bone for the Labour Party. And I just seriously sit here and think this is down to 100% the sheer incompetence and chaos of the Tory Party. I don't even think he'd be near if there hadn't been what there'd been. I'm not hearing anything new. There's no money, Alex, is there?
Well, absolutely correct. And there's no great dividing line in policy between the parties. There's no inspiration, there's no crusade. And that's the way it is. But then there doesn't have to be. All he has to do is to stand upright and not fall over. Incidentally, the stuff on Boris Johnson today, people say, oh, why is he quoting Boris Johnson? He's quoting Boris Johnson, so it's a news line, because he's got nothing of policy substance to say. So in a policy vacuum, you do something like, oh, let's quote Boris Johnson. Now, you might get a little bit of flack on it, but basically it'll create the news line and upset the Conservative Party. So in the absence of a policy initiative, then what you do is you say something that will capture a headline.
It's interesting, that.
Moving on now to Scottish politics, Alex. Humza Yousaf has been described as a weak leader. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I mean, well, let's use a Scottish phrase. He's not set the heather on fire over the last year. I mean, he's done one half of what he had to do reasonably well, not as well as it could have been, and that was to clear out the total poisonous, toxic agenda he was left by Nicola Sturgeon. So he's cleared out self-identification, total, complete and utter nonsense, and that's no longer, they're not going to longer pursue it. He's cleared out, there was something called the Bottles Return Scheme, which was, he let the Green Party handle it, which was, born disaster. So he stopped that, and he was going to have a fishing ban, which was ridiculous around the coastal communities. So he's cleared out a number of the more ridiculous policies that he was left. Having said that, he's kept the hate crime bill, which is now being introduced on the 1st of April, rather appropriately, I would have said, and that's got disaster written all over it.
Would it be fair to say, Alex, that the problem for Humza Yousaf is that he is 100% associated with a woman who has left that party that she used to be in charge of in disgrace, where hundreds of thousands of well-meaning Scots who wanted independence have paid their subscription fees and have seen what's happened. I mean, the seismic fall of her and her husband and that party in Scotland is unbelievable from where it was. You've got to admit that.
Well, it's not been the greatest time to be a continuity candidate, which is what he announced. So he cleared out some of the legacy, but what he didn't do was either make a great show of it. I mean, if you're doing that, then what you should say is, look, I'm clearing off all this because the new agenda is economic growth, or I'm set on a new agenda. He didn't do that. Nor has he, rather like Keir Starmer, has he created his own distinctive policy agenda.
Absolutely.
Now, for Starmer, it doesn't matter, because he's facing a discredited Tory government which is going to get swept out of office. For Humza, of course, he's facing the Labour Party. And yet, in a lot of his announcements, he keeps talking about how it's going to be a contest between the SNP and the Tories. Well, clearly it isn't. It's a contest in the vast majority of seats between the SNP and the Labour Party. Yeah. And you can't pretend to people we're going to beat the Tories when you've got the elephant in the room, which is the Labour Party threatening lots and lots of SNP seats. So he's got to get his act together. And above all, he's got to reignite the fire of independence, to motivate nationalist voters. They want to hear how he's going to get Scottish independence, not what he's not doing or how he's going to hammer the Tories.
Very interesting indeed. Well, I want to talk to you about another issue now, because there's reports that 3/4 of Scots back an assisted dying law. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, the Scottish Parliament, one of the very good things it's done, I think this is the third time it's considered this legislation in the 25 years of the Parliament. And when I was First Minister, the redoubtable Margaret MacDonald, I don't know if you remember Margaret, she was a great legendary figure in Scottish politics, unfortunately passed now, but she was a great figure, an independent nationalist member of the Scottish Parliament. And she introduced it about 12 years ago as a private member's. Well, she herself was suffering from Parkinson's disease, and it's fairly later stages when she introduced the bill, so it made it particularly poignant. And now Liam McCarthy, who's an MP, an MSP for Orkney, for the Orkney Islands in the north of Scotland, has introduced it again. This time it looks like it's going through, and public opinion is now moved very substantially from 50 years ago. The one thing I would say is that the detail of this has to be absolutely right. Because while most of us would say in response to a number of well-publicised cases, the Esther Ransom, for example, would be example of somebody is fully compos mentis and they're facing a terminal illness which is going to involve agony, pain, distress and a whole range of disabilities, and they make a conscious choice that, look, I'd rather go with dignity, then people would say, yeah, that sounds right.
I think
the trouble is, of course, unless you get this absolutely right, it could be subject to abuse.
I think you can pass it. I think legislating it is a different matter. But I will say this, I think it's an eye-opener. I think it's a debate. We've talked about Dame Esther Ransom down here wanting to have that debate. Starmer says there will be one. Of course, he's promised that because he wants to win the election. But the Scots are leading the way on this. I think it's a debate that needs to be had.
The people of Scotland are often extremely progressive, and they do lead the way for legislative.
The Scots are progressive.
They are.
There's a number of social legislation. There's the smoking in public places.
Culturally, socially,
my predecessors, the minimum pricing for alcohol in my term of office, and this. And to be fair to the Scots Parliament, it was debated last time extremely well, extremely courteously, civilly, and this time I understand the debates have been conducted in the same fashion.
It's a discussion that undoubtedly needs to be had, but as you said, in the right way and done in a sympathetic and logical way so that people don't just put emotion into it and can make the right decision. Alex, it's always an absolute pleasure. We sort of, as usual, run out of time. When do you think the election will be in this country?
Oh, as late as possible. I mean, listen, if we could get away with waiting to Burns Night on the 25th of January next year, he would do it. And of course, people say, oh, nobody will vote in the deep midwinter. But of course, that's exactly what the Conservative Party want.
Do they not wait till the end of January?
They shall wait till I think it'll be November, but I mean, they wait till the absolute end. And if nobody goes to the polls, then I can tell you, Rishi Sunak will be absolutely delighted.
Good man, Alex. Always great to have you on. Thank you
so much, Alex Salmond, for joining us this morning.